let's get to this wonderful session about relationships with national agencies, around collaboration potentially between the Department of Transport and STBs and the national transport agencies, by which we mean National Highways and Network Rail. So representing the STBs, we have Maria Machankozis, Chief Executive of Midlands Connect, Mike Smith, Programme Director and of Strategic Planning at Network Rail. Give us a wave, Mike. Fabulous. Adam Simmons, Director of Strategic Planning and Analysis at National Highways. Adam, a wave, thank you. And Andy Rind, Deputy Director, Regional Partnerships and Delivery at the Department of Transport. Maria, I'm going to hand it to you to take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Right, I seriously need to complain to the organisers. It's the third year in a row I've been asked to participate at siesta time. It's just not on. And apologies in advance. Looks like there's a lot of rumbling stomachs. So, but listen, we are determined to make this as interactive and as informative and insightful as possible. We have here all representatives from key national agencies. There's a lot of debate on transport. There's a lot of conversations on the future of transport, and particularly not in terms of infrastructure, but actually in terms of mobility as a whole. So this session, we're going to get a bit more insight in terms of not only what each agency, including STBs, do, but actually how we avoid those silos. And what are the areas that we are, at the moment, identifying as key areas of collaboration? So I'm going to start by asking each of you, if you don't mind. I'll start from you, if you don't mind. The next 12 months, we just heard from the previous session, we got a general election. We don't know when, and we're not going to go in politics. Don't worry, Andy. But we do have a general election coming up. What are your priorities for the next 12 months? What is in your thinking? What are the things that you are still determined to do despite all this changing environment?
Well, the first thing was that we're not waiting.
Yeah.
Can't do that, can we? I look at it like this. I think the role of us is to get a better balance between public and private transport, simple as that. We've got to encourage people to do this. Car keys. Put the car keys down and trust the public transport alternative to not give them anxiety and make it a seamless alternative that they want to choose. And to do that, I think it's in our hands. And there's no doubt that we now have more devolved funding across all the partners than we've ever had before. So my mission in the next 12 months is to say it's literally in our hands. Let's not let anybody take it away from us.
Thank you. Andy?
Well, you mentioned the general election, Maria, and we don't quite know when it's going to be, but we do know that within the next 12 months there will be one. So we're not waiting either. We are championing, or at least our bit of the department is certainly championing thinking about person and place in transport. So the department is modally organised, got to be organised some way, and we are historically modally organised, but that's not the way that people think about transport. That's Dave's point. And this set of ministers and future sets of ministers, I'm sure, will be incredibly keen to give people the right choices. People demand a lot more from transport than they did. Transport planning was dead straightforward when I was a young transport planner. You did some counts, you applied some growth factors. Occasionally you asked some people, but only very occasionally did you ask some people where they were travelling to and from and why, and very rarely you'd ask them why. And I think key to delivering proper joined up transport that provides people with the choices that they can make and navigate is about really understanding what drives people and the choices that they make in their wider life. And I think the STBs have done some brilliant work in that regard. So it's taken it to the next level. It's about providing choice. Funding will continue to be constrained, so it will be really important to be able to continue to make the case for investment by working together, sharing evidence and also sharing insight, the soft stuff as well as the analytical stuff.
Very good. Adam?
Thank you, Maria. So National Highways, my reflection is that there's been a lot of conversation last couple of days about integration, and we've got some good examples to share about that. I think it does start with those of us who are our network operators, transport operators, being offering as good a service as we can for our customers. So for us, actually, the next 12 months marks the point as we close out our second road period. So obviously focusing on delivering on our commitments, delivering the levels of performance that we're targeted to achieve, and then agreeing with government what the plans are for the next 5 years. So for our road investment strategy, RIS 3. And I think in that, I'm sure we'll come on to, it's been a real step change in how we've planned for the next 5 years and how we've been able to draw on the expertise and evidence and intelligence from the subnational bodies to inform that sort of work. Yeah. And I think that's where we're able to then achieve those, marrying up a well-performing network for its immediate customers with then being part of an integrated transport system overall.
Thank you. And I guess from our STB perspective, the next 12 months are going to be really, really important just because of what Adam has just mentioned. We know that, as you know, STBs are renowned for identifying priorities for their areas, identifying and making the case for what really is required for our national networks in terms of supporting growth, economic and social as well outcomes. And we know that these next 12 months, we need to elevate our voices again, make sure that those priorities are captured and are reflected in your RIS 3 program. And we know it's tight, it's very difficult. So there's going to be even more prioritization, more understanding of actually what is really required in the next 5 years and what's required in the next 10 and 15 and so on. There's also, particularly, allow me to say, in the Midlands and the North, there's been quite a lot of changes in the rail agenda in terms of pipeline. The Network North proposals have meant that as STBs, we're going to have to reflect again in terms of those connections and what does that mean in terms of infrastructure and also service patterns and so on. So we are engaging very heavily with Network Rail and HS2 and the department, just trying to figure out how best to keep momentum and pace rather than restart from scratch again in that sense. And finally, we are very aware of the evolution and the huge opportunities associated with that. So we're working with not only the combined authorities, but with actually all our partners and local authorities, because they are themselves preparing for hopefully local transport funds and local transport plans. There's a lot of debate around that at the moment, so we're here to help them in that space and see if we can, as you say, make sure that we're all talking to each other and collaborating. So that takes me to the next question, which is about collaboration. So many people say, do you really collaborate with Network Rail and National Highways and the department? What is the relationship? Can I ask you, just for the benefit of the audience, what really what's proved useful to yourselves so far in terms of the work of STBs? And how do you envisage, what else we need to do to take it to the next level? Because everybody's saying exactly the same. We need to stop looking at our transport in silos. Yes, funding programs might be set up in that manner, and that partly is what dictates a lot of the behaviors. Funding be there, funding be there. But in terms of what can we do? What we've done so far, and what can we do better, as Andy said, to take it to the next level? May I start now with you, perhaps?
Yes, of course, yeah. There are a couple of examples I can share, and I think what I would say for me is I kind of like the every little helps sort of analogy, and I think there's no one sort of big silver bullet sort of thing that says if you do this and suddenly you've done magical collaboration. I think the nature of our work is there are lots of tricky problems, might be geographically specific or sort of subject specific, and working through those. So in agreeing our evidence for government for RIS 3, subnational transport bodies have been incredibly helpful in producing what we call route strategies. And one example there, Midlands Connect, your strategic corridor plan, has directly influenced and been part of our strategic case for the A50 sort of Uttoxeter sort of work. So that very directly, that intelligence, that evidence from subnational bodies coming in. I'll give a second example. We've been asked by the department to think about how the strategic road network, so England's motorways and major A roads, interact and work in an integrated way with local roads. work done by the team has, it's called the Urban SRM. It's a bit of a misnomer, but that's sort of the umbrella term. Came up with lots of recommendations, lots of possible locations we could do things. My challenge to the team was, let's just pick a small number of those and actually do it. So I think they've picked 3 locations. One of those is working with Transport for North East, Transport for North, local highway authorities around the Gateshead, Newcastle area, specifically around active travel. And I think there was an acknowledgement that in terms of capacity enhancement on the A1, A19, some good work's been done there. But perhaps National Highways could think more about active travel on our network, but perhaps critically joining up active travel networks in those areas. So there was an example of some very specific work being brought together with a bit of a toolkit, but leading directly to some specific actions and plans. So I do think it's that challenge of getting down to the gritty brass tacks, and there's a couple of examples of how we've done that with subnational transport bodies.
Thank you, Adam. Maybe Andy now, next.
Yeah, I think it's about sharing information and evidence. So I'll pick an example that's been mentioned earlier, Ely and Hawley, really good example. You could look at it as it's a rail scheme, in fact it's a freight scheme, isn't it? You know, but actually the evidence that was put together by EEH and Transport East jointly made it really clear that this is a number one infrastructure priority for that wider region, but also really evidenced the other impacts of making that investment off the rail network. So what will it do for lorry traffic? What will it do for reliability? What will it do for distribution between the haven ports and the consolidation centres in the Midlands? So I think that's a really good example. I think the other thing that you all do really well is you doggedly incubate ideas. So, you know, ideas that are too immature, perhaps for National Highways or Network Rail to really invest in them yet. And Midlands Rail Hub would be a really good example of that, I think, and we've seen that come to fruition through Network North. But you know, lots and lots of work went in over a large number of years to build a strategic case to even get the investment idea on the agenda. And I think there's a real skill and a real need for that.
Thank you, Andy.
I think this is on at least 2 levels. I think part of what the first 2 examples was that, I mean, we work with National Highways on we literally sit down every 4 weeks with the two kind of strategic teams. We bring people together in that. We foster that co-working relationship. We did a really good piece on Southampton to West Midlands freight. It was a genuine piece of strategic planning done together. And we've recently both begun to work on that sort of continued every 4-week conversation level with Active Travel England. Now they've got themselves geared up. Our relationships continue then with each of some national transport bodies, and we've got ways to feed that in, and they feed into us, and I totally agree with what you say. They incubate really good ideas that we have the opportunity then to put on the ground. But even on a, I mean, I'm lucky enough, I have the privilege of leading the Restoring Your Railway programme. We've got 21 projects around the country, creating, reconnecting a significant amount of people to the rail network. But even that has some cross fertilisation. We have the Northumberland line will open in September. That is a line that will reconnect 150,000 people to the rail network, but it's got a key freight use as well. It feeds a biomass to a power station. It will take pressure off the national and road network into Newcastle, and it will create journeys all through the rest of the country. Each one of those, and some of our new stations that we're going to do, are going to decongest the M5, for example. There's 2 really good examples there. The business case is almost a joint business case between ourselves, the local subnational transport body. It's just that we're the people driving that actual intervention.
Yeah.
But we can't do that intervention in Northumberland or in the Southwest or in the Midlands. We can't do that intervention without the business case being, as we say, the data comes together, and in practical terms, we bring the agencies together on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this isn't a case of building a philosophy. It's actually getting that philosophy on the ground. That point that I think in Rufus Boyd's speech yesterday, about 65% of people say that the reason they don't change modes or they don't consider another mode is because they don't see it being integrated.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bit shameful for us, really, isn't it? We
It
can
is.
do better than that.
Yeah. And that's what I like throughout the rest of the panel, to continue to remind your point about the incubator, the idea and the escalation of ideas and innovation, and how you start to then apply it to the rest of the network and how we work together on these things. So that takes me to one area that I think was mentioned in the previous panel, which I think is taking a lot of time from the private sector as well, and we got a lot of representatives from the private sector here who might want to know what's the thinking in the space of, we cannot plan just, I always say, just for concrete and tracks. We now need to plan for energy, we need to plan for digital infrastructure, and all of us are trying to get an understanding of how that might work in the future, and more importantly, not only what's the need locally, but how you're going to roll it out, and the strategic demand for energy to power, freight as it goes along, but also the rail side, both for road and rail. So in terms of collaboration amongst agencies, what's happening at the moment? Let's give our audience some ideas of some projects or initiatives that Network Rail, National Highways are doing in that space, and you see there's an opportunity there for STBs and us to do more collaboration with the department. Is there anyone in particular you want to flag up in terms of what National Highways are doing in that space?
I'll share a couple of reflections, and then actually I might ask you a question, Maria, if I may. So I think what struck me over the conversation we had today and yesterday is us being really specific with the questions we want to be asking ourselves and to be tackling. With the National Highways, we want to be thinking probably about 10 to 15 years out, which is not to prejudge what government may choose to do in road periods, but just start to say, well, here are some of the bigger trends that we need to be ready for. And I'd be interested to know from your perspective almost what questions you might be asking yourselves. I think for us, climate resilience, it came up sort of today and yesterday, really thinking about those trends around flooding. So how might that change? What infrastructure solutions that we might need to put in place, but also what some more operational solutions we might need to put in place, because we won't be able to just remove all surface water in all incidences. So how do we perhaps update our operational side? And an interesting conversation I did have yesterday was to say, well, actually a lot of our strategic roads and strategic rail might physically be quite close to each other. So actually there are some joint opportunities there where we might share, say, flooding risk that we can sort of think sort of collectively on that. I do think some areas that we are working together, I mean, you obviously mentioned sort of thinking about multimodal freight, in decarbonisation, actually really looking to share, we both buy steel and things like that. How do we work together with the sector to really drive that? We both share the same ambitions to decarbonise our materials and our ways of working. So there's good sharing of practice there. So I think absolutely those. So I suppose that's where we were thinking. But I think it's really important for us to state we probably all share the same overall objectives around safety, reliable journeys, environmental sustainability, making it cheaper for taxpayers or fare payers. I suppose what are the common questions? And I'd say I'd be interested to know from you, Maria, perhaps what you're asking yourselves, and whether the sort of questions I posed there strike a chord with you.
No, so we're definitely asking a few questions in the Midlands. I mean, don't mind me saying we always acknowledge that the Midlands is in a unique position in that you cannot avoid it. You cannot go over it. I'm sure colleagues will always remember me saying, you cannot go over it, you cannot underneath, you've got to go through it. But that's a USP in a good way, because in terms of incubators and ideas and thinking about where strategically we need to think about supplying good charging facilities for drivers, for instance, and joined up that strategic planning with local authorities in terms of where will be the biggest strategic sites where you can give confidence to both passenger and freight users of that decarbonisation agenda. And the Midlands has to be a place where this needs to happen. So the questions that we're asking at the moment is, where is the whole debate around a strategic planning, not just let's look at, you know, the Levi funding as amazing and as welcome has been for local authorities. Where do you join it all up? You know, what does that mean for the next 5 years? Where are the gaps? Is it all commercially driven? And therefore, for anybody who wants to undertake a national journey, where is the reassurance that the planning of infrastructure energy has been done in a strategic manner? So those are the questions that we're asking. We're asking, going to you and to Network Rail and the department and also to the private sector, what is your level of understanding of demand and strategic planning when it comes to energy in particular? Because in the Midlands, there's a lot of freight and logistics, for instance, and we're proud of that. There's a lot of innovation in every mode of transport that you look at. But that happens everywhere in the other STBs. It's how you join the dots and how we can work with yourselves in that space. And so those questions about who's actually assessing demand for energy supply, for infrastructure, in a manner that creates a strategic network, not just a local network. It's the sort of space where we are at the moment. You want to add to that? Or?
No, I think you've covered
Yeah.
that. We have to. I think we could work closer.
Yeah.
I think we could be quite powerful voices, and we could point out, particularly if you think about the providers in the energy sector, and work with those a little bit closer. I think sometimes relationships don't quite gel together because the incentives appear to be slightly different.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the incentives are different, really.
Yeah.
Everyone wants success, and everybody wants success in an environment where the public cares more about the environment continually than they ever did before.
Yeah.
And we have a footprint that we must be more and more careful with.
Yeah.
I don't think that's any different to whether it's a private sector or a public sector company.
And I guess, Andy, the role of DFT in facilitating those connections with wider government in this space is something that we also look at. And back to you, the question about questions that we ask.
Yeah.
What are those links between the department and the Department for Energy, you know, and DEFRA and others to join up all this thinking?
Yeah, I think for sure, Maria, you know, you will have heard me say this before, it's incredibly hard to join things up at the government level.
Yeah.
And there's no point pretending otherwise. So don't wait to be asked. I think the things that STBs are doing to try and understand future demand, to be able to model scenarios of future demand, because there's such uncertainty. The one thing we can be certain of is uncertainty.
Yeah.
It wasn't me that said that first, but but you know, we've seen examples of that today. We've seen it with the work on Levi. We've seen it with the agent-based modelling work that Transport East has done and that others are using, where actually you can model scenarios and you can play with a number of variables and paint a broad picture of demand. I think if we wait till we get an absolute pin-sharp picture, or wait for government to paint the pin-sharp picture, we'll be waiting a long time. The best thing to do is to stimulate the debate and start to put the evidence out there, and don't wait to be asked. Just keep doing it.
It's a good point. Thank you, Andy. And the one other area, apart from this, you know, energy and digital, the one area that everybody's asking, do we really talk amongst ourselves on influencing behaviours? You know, again, back to let's avoid just talking about track and concrete. Is there something else we could do more in terms of the user and understanding the user for both, again, passenger and freight and influencing behaviours? Is there anything you want to bring in that space? There's a collaboration. Andy, you want to kick off?
I'll have a go. Someone's got to go first. A really hard one, this, you know. So I said, transport planner 30 years ago, it was all about predicting, providing, and largely telling. So, you know, what's the modal split for this development? Oh, let's assume that 10% will get on their bikes and another 10% will get on public transport, and we'll have to provide the rest with car parking spaces and junctions that can accommodate those flows on and off the development. The thing that we missed all those years ago was actually asking people and understanding people the choices that they make and why they make those choices. And it's complicated. It's complicated. And it varies depending on who you're talking to. But I think the key thing is to talk to people and understand what needs to be true for those for people to be able to make the right choices. I think, enough years have gone by where we've tried to influence from the top down to prove that that's not going to be very effective. There's no other industry does that. Amazon doesn't do that, does it? No other industry says we're going to impose a doctrine or a set of behaviours on the population. No other industry does that, and nor should we.
Yeah, good point. You want to kick in now, Adam?
Yeah, I had two reflections. So I think first, you touched on digital. I do think that data and information to people who are travelling, I think is the great opportunity ahead of us to think about integration between modes and to give, as you said, Andy, that choice, I think, to customers, about choice rather than a sort of constraining options. I think for me there where STBs I think are well placed is there are a lot of data out there.
Yeah.
There's potentially a lot of information out there. What is actually useful on there? And I think we've heard some good examples yesterday and today about that sort of intelligence. So that I would welcome that. The second area for me, Sarah Sharples this morning talked about that sort of intangible thing about travelling, which is we should value things like joy,
Yeah.
the joy of a particular journey.
Very good point.
And I reflect that we've done some work thinking about the A14 scheme that we delivered 3 years ago. And on one level, it's hit a lot of good metrics. It's delivered on time, on budget. It's delivering on its safety objectives, or its sort of journey time objectives so far, and its environmental objectives. What struck me in some of the emerging evaluation work is that this is part of the network that has, I think, about 25% of its traffic is HGVs,
Right.
Compared to 9% elsewhere on the strategic road network. So the feedback we had from truck drivers is actually the experience now is better in that experiential way rather than just a journey time way. And the experience from people who felt unsafe before, they felt hemmed in, they feel safer now. So that customer experience is getting better. And I do think STBs are very well placed as a sort of convener of people, the multifacets of people's sort of lives, thinking about different journeys, how that connects to home and work and so on. I think to help make the case around experience and help to make the right investments to improve experience. So I think we've got a glimpse of that there, but I would really welcome sort of that STB insight and intelligence in that way that I think can then take it on to the next level.
That is definitely a new space for a lot of us, so thank you for that. You feel you agree?
I couldn't agree more. That's why I dropped the car keys and like that. I mean, it's anxiety.
Yeah.
So let's not. You touched exactly on it. People see travel as a means to an end, not an end in itself. And actually, we've got to help them enjoy that journey and make it productive for them. Help them make that productive. That means we need to think carefully about every part of that journey. Don't underestimate how easy it is for someone to be put off by something that we, say in our own mode, we just brush over that because we're used to doing it. Well, other people may not be. If you're in the world of trying to get people to do something different, say in their community, because they've not had I'll come back to my role, my day-to-day role, you're saying to people who've not had a rail journey opportunity for 2-3 generations. It's deep set stuff.
I know.
And that is right in the culture of what people want from their travel.
Yeah.
And they want the journey to be, as I say, to be as productive as the end point as well. And but we've got to, and I think, in some ways, as the national infrastructure providers, when half of your mind is dealing with the day-to-day, he talks about flooding, talks about that. It's no excuse that we don't listen quite as much. But I think the partnership with the SNTBs can be really, really important at this point because over your constituency, if you like, you understand the people. And I'm truly passionate about Britain is quite a regional. The culture can be slightly different. What people want out of the travel can be different. You can't run the British transport network from one computer on one spreadsheet somewhere in one place. It can't be done like that. And that's where the subnational transport bodies can really work with us. Bring that intel, but we have then got to put it into every part of the journey.
Yeah, and that saying a culture as well through all of the organizations, isn't it? Because there is a more demand. I think the work that Transport for the North have, I think they just published the social mobility, social inclusion report.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that agenda back on the debate. I've been here long enough now to remember that was quite influential. It was a major tool that the department actually introduced, but it went quiet. So it is good to see, how people feel about their place and how they feel about their access to jobs, the affordability issue as well as the accessibility issue. Is all very important and part of the planning, I guess. It has to definitely inform that. Okay, so I'm mindful of the time. We don't want to go as far run over as the previous session.
We're right up to time.
Is that okay?
I mean, if there's one burning question in the room, if anyone can stand it, because we are having into lunch, but it's been a brilliant session. Any burning questions at all? Lady at the front, do you want to come through with the mic? Thank you, and just let us know who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Daisy Smith at National Highways. Adam mentioned about our A14 evaluation, and I just wanted to know what you all thought about where there are opportunities to identify and better communicate and share lessons learnt across STBs and with national organisations as well.
Yeah, and can I pick up that? I mean, you are raising a question that we all need to get agreed, because there's one thing that everybody's talking about in the industry, and our private sector partners deserve recognition on this, is the amount of time, the planning, the delivery, the construction of infrastructure it takes in this country. It's not good, really. Everybody's accepting that. I don't want to be too political about it. So we need to absolutely learn from the best of the best. And I don't think at the moment there's that platform where we can learn from the Elizabeth Line, from actually some of the amazing transformational work that HS2 Limited are doing as we speak on the construction of the line, right? So it will be helpful. That's one space that STBs are also trying to tap into, is how we enable those conversations. We promote Midlands Rail Hub. We're very keen to make sure that those conversations happen. So Network Rail colleagues talk to, the conversation happens about how we can make Midlands Rail Hub happen ASAP. How we can get the local planning authorities and support Network Rail in the process. And so it's a very important debate. We need to get far better at sharing experiences. And the Centres of Excellence work hopefully will also enable that, not only with what National Highways and Network Rail do, but also what local authorities do, because actually they are very good at also at delivery. So yeah, from a STB perspective, this is a space we definitely entering. The FT are very keen that we facilitate that platform, and hopefully we can invest in it properly, because it is very important. Any more to add to that? No? Andy?
I'll very quickly add to it. As somebody who took the A14 out of the roads programme in 2010 and put it back in a couple of years after, actually, I did run a lessons learned exercise on A14 with National Highways colleagues a few weeks ago for our project delivery community. And it wasn't about the contracting methodology that we used or the way that we constructed the bridges. It was all about behaviour and collaboration,
it is.
relationships with communities, and leadership, really. But it's, I think you're right. You're quite right, Daisy. It's not in our DNA. We sprint to get these projects done, albeit I take Maria's point about they take a long time, especially if you keep taking them out of the programme, putting them back in the programme. But we sprint to get them done, we get them done, and we move on to the next one, and we don't necessarily take time to reflect and think really clearly about what were the factors that made it a success.
Yeah. Very important. Very, very important. Any more?
Any more for any more? I don't know whether people can stand it. I mean, it was an absolutely superb session. So, Maria, thank you very much indeed for chairing that for us. Maria from Midlands Connect. Thank you very much indeed. Adam from Highways, Andy from DFT, and Mike from Network Rail. Great to hear your strategic and delivery insight there. Please give a round of applause for our panel. I think that was brilliant. Thanks very much indeed.